Fentanyl, the deadly drug that became the leading cause of death among young people in the United States, is finally disappearing from the streets. Overdose deaths are now back to pre-pandemic levels, and the trend continues downward. But here's the interesting part. While this may sound like good news, there's a dark side to it. The drug that's replacing fentanyl might be even worse.
Stronger than fentanyl, a drug you've never heard of, is killing hundreds every year. Fentanyl fueled the worst drug crisis the West has ever seen. Now, an even more dangerous drug is wreaking havoc faster than authorities can keep up.
We're talking about nitazines, or nitazines. I've found pronunciations for all tastes. A family of opioids with some variants that are up to 1,000 times more potent than heroin. And no, this 1,000 times figure is no exaggeration. And the consequences are already being felt. In the US, between 2019 and 2024, these drugs claimed the lives of 2,000 people with a clear upward trend. But unlike fentanyl, nitazines are hitting harder in Europe. In the UK alone, more than 400 overdose deaths have been recorded in just a year and a half. And beyond that, Germany, France, Ireland, Australia, and Canada are the countries of greatest concern. That's not even counting African countries, where this drug is wreaking havoc when mixed with Kush, a hodgepodge of drugs that can be bought on the street for as little as 30 cents. And pay attention because most tests aren't designed to detect this drug, so the number of fatalities could be much higher. According to an academic specializing in this field, nitazines could have claimed 30% more lives in the United Kingdom alone. Even so, the figures are not yet apocalyptic, far from it, but all epidemics start with just a few cases. For now, the ACIC, Australia's Criminal Intelligence Agency, already classifies nitazines as a greater threat than fentanyl. So here on Visualeconomik, we've taken a look in depth at this issue. Because yes, economics has a lot to say about whether or not this drug will become an epidemic, like fentanyl. Are they a threat because they are so potent? Or is there something else that makes them so dangerous? Why might curbing nitazines be much more complicated than curbing fentanyl? We'll tell you in this video. But before we begin, if you're interested in the world of investing, if you want to learn how to manage your savings, protect yourself against inflation, and figure out how to make money beyond your day job, I've got some news for you. At Visual Factory, we've created the Visual Factory Club, a newsletter where every week we send out free content focused on essential financial education, the ABC of what everyone should know to understand the stock market, financial markets in general, investment platforms, how to assess investment opportunities, and which markets may have more or less potential. Because of course, if you want to invest your money so you're not at the mercy of your country's economic instability, you at least need to understand the basics of the financial world. In the Visual Factory Club, you will learn all of this completely free of charge through the link below and this QR code. You can sign up for the club and start receiving the upcoming editions. What's more, when you sign up, you'll receive a dossier where I explain in a clear and simple way the most essential investment concepts, what multiples or the PE ratio are, what indices are, ETFs, derivatives, funds, EPS, you get the idea. After that, every week you'll receive additional materials and market analysis to help you stay informed about what's going on. And by the way, the sooner you sign up, the better. Since we send each episode of the series by email, and every edition is unique, if you're not subscribed, you might miss some of them, and you won't be able to access them later. But with that said, let's get into the video. Like fentanyl, nitazines were originally developed as a medication, specifically as an alternative to morphine. A Swiss pharmaceutical company was behind it in the 1950s, but unlike fentanyl, these molecules were never approved for medical use. Their own creators realized they were extremely toxic, and because they were so potent, getting the dosage right was very difficult. A mistake of just a few milligrams could mean the difference between life and death. The Swiss pharmaceutical company eventually set this formulation aside and moved on to other projects, but their research remained available, open to anyone who wanted to read it. Without realizing it, they were handing drug traffickers the recipe for a drug that would wreak havoc several decades later. In 2010, these types of drugs began appearing on the black market, but it's only in recent years that they've really become popular. And although nitazines are a very diverse family of chemicals, the vast majority have one thing in common. They are much more potent than fentanyl. The most common family is isotoniazines, which are about 5 times more potent than fentanyl. But it's also easy to find etonitazines on the black market, which are 10 times more potent. Which, to put another way, means it's 500 times more potent than heroin. In other words, you need a dose 500 times smaller to overdose. And believe me, the list goes on, with chemicals that are twice as potent as these etonitazines. But the two we've told you about are the most common. at least as of today. It's true then that each of these families has its own variants. This will be important later on, though not necessarily because these variants are more potent. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. As we were saying, starting in 2010, this type of drug began to have a greater presence on the black market, and starting around 2019, it exploded. The reason? Experts agree on one thing: the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban. The Taliban drastically reduced poppy cultivation in the country, which had been supplying between 80 and 90% of the world's heroin. This might seem like great news, but when heroin started to become scarce on the streets, people looked for other alternatives. The big winner was, without a doubt, fentanyl. But nitazene drugs also became popular because of this. Now that fentanyl is starting to run out, well, many people believe history will repeat itself. One drug disappears, only to be replaced by an even worse one. In fact, we're already seeing something like this. In this other chart, you can see the variants that the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has identified. In 2020, nitazenes were virtually unknown, while authorities found more than 60 fentanyl analogues. By analogues, we mean drugs with a very similar molecular structure. However, new types of nitazenes are growing at a breakneck pace, far outpacing fentanyl. Keep in mind that finding more variants doesn't mean there are more of these drugs on the streets, but it does make it clear that drug traffickers are very interested in this family of molecules. Now, at this point, we need to make one thing clear. The problem with nitazenes is not their potency. Well, yes, but not for the obvious reason you're thinking of. The thing is, when it comes to the danger level of drugs, something similar happens to what happens with taxes. If you raise too much, you end up collecting less. Well, it's the same thing here. If a drug is very dangerous, very few people will die from it. The explanation is very clear. Think of a pill that kills 100% of the people who take it. No one would try it. And obviously, if its danger level is 0%, then no one dies either. So there has to be a point in between, where deaths are at their highest. And let's see, everything indicates that point being quite close to 100%. The really important thing is that it's not linear. A drug twice as potent as another doesn't kill twice as many people, but far fewer. In fact, according to a major study, the increase in drug potency in the 2010s, mainly due to fentanyl, accounts for only 1 in 5 overdose deaths among those without a college degree, and just 6% among college graduates. The rest is basically due to the fact that the price of opioids plummeted. So no, the real problem with nitazenes isn't that they're 5, 10, or 25 times more potent than fentanyl, at least not directly. The problem lies in how it is distributed, and above all, in how it is consumed.
You can produce them with different chemicals that are relatively easy to get a hold of, and you can do it in an underground laboratory. And because they're so potent, you need less for the same size of market, so they're easier to smuggle.
As we reported on this channel, the main reason for the decline in fentanyl has been that Chinese authorities have cracked down on illegal labs in their country. With nitazenes, however, this strategy isn't as promising. Their supply chain is much more fragmented, and it's easier to manufacture this drug on the sly while claiming you're making medicine. What's more, as we've seen before, these are highly versatile molecules, so you can always synthesize a chemical with similar effects that isn't technically illegal. Some countries like the United Kingdom have taken a hard line. They've banned the production of anything that resembles a nitazene. But clearly, there's a grey area that's difficult to regulate. And the worst part is that even if this could be regulated, would it really do any good? We're talking about drugs that are very easy to manufacture. If one lab closes, another one opens on the other side of the world. This explains why nitazene production isn't as concentrated in China as fentanyl is. Mind you, China is still the largest producer, but it's not even necessary. If China doesn't produce these drugs, India can manufacture them without any problem. Or Pakistan. These aren't random examples, but countries where a lot of activity is already taking place. For instance, according to an investigation by the Wall Street Journal, a Pakistani website had more than 100 different profiles offering these drugs, including etonitazene, one of its most potent variants. But it's not as if they were offering them to other Pakistanis. Anyone anywhere in the world can make a convenient payment with crypto, and the drug will arrive in their mailbox via regular mail. And now, I have a question for you. If you recall, the Swiss lab that created nitazenes shelved them because it was practically impossible to get the dosage right. If doctors can't, will a Pakistani lab really be able to measure everything down to the milligram to prevent overdoses? I don't know about you, but I doubt it. Be that as it may, India and Pakistan aren't even the only alternatives to China. In fact, the most notorious case of an illegal nitazene factory occurred in the heart of the United Kingdom, specifically in Waltham, northeast of London. Pay close attention. We're talking about a factory that produced around 150,000 pills, and which, once again, sold them on the deep web using cryptocurrency and the postal service. Now, all this production stuff is only half the problem, because nitazines have another characteristic that's very different from fentanyl, making them much, much more dangerous. The fact is, very few people actually know they're using them. People who use fentanyl, as a general rule, know they're taking fentanyl. They may not know its exact purity, but at least they know what substance they're using. In contrast, no one buys packets or syringes of nitazines. This drug isn't consumed directly, it's mixed with other substances, often without the users or dealers even knowing. That's why many people refer to it as the Frankenstein drug. And pay close attention, because it's been found not only mixed with other drugs, but also with sleeping pills and painkillers.
The consumption of nitazines is often unintentional, as NSOs are illegally sold as or mixed into drugs such as methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, ketamine, oxycodone, synthetic cannabinoids, MDMA, GHB, and counterfeit pharmaceuticals, as well as in vaping devices.
Or if you prefer, consider this other news item. Though more anecdotal, it makes things much clearer.
In 2024, pills sold as MDMA, also known as ecstasy, during a music festival in Sydney caused several hospitalizations and were later discovered to contain nitazines and no MDMA.
Do you remember what we said earlier about how a more potent drug isn't necessarily more lethal due to the fact that people consume less of it? Well, that's true. But if people don't know what they're consuming, then it's less true. Mind you, when Australian authorities warned that heroin mixed with nitazines had reached the country, we have more evidence that people did indeed dispose of the heroin they had bought. We know this from an analysis of wastewater, where traces of nitazines were detected that were dumped directly into the water, without first passing through urine. So people do respond responsibly to these threats, but it's clear that very few drug users are going to quit for good, as long as the threat of nitazines persists. Sooner or later, they will use again, and they may, without knowing it, be using an opioid 10 times more potent than fentanyl. And the worst part is that if an overdose occurs, it's possible that not even naloxone, the miracle drug for treating opioid overdoses, will be able to save their life. You see, azotonitazines, which are most common variant, pose an additional danger we haven't yet mentioned. When you ingest a drug, over time, its molecules break down, splitting into smaller pieces that aren't usually dangerous on their own. However, azotonitazines break down into another type of nitazine, which is even more potent. Their concentration will obviously be lower, yes, but the concern is that these new nitazines can block naloxone. Normally this can be resolved with another dose of the medication, but naturally it has to be administered at exactly the right point, and not everyone is paying attention, or even knows that this can happen. Do you understand now why this drug is setting off so many alarms? It's very potent, so such a small amount is needed, making smuggling very easy. Its production is highly decentralized, so it's not as easy to crack down on as was the case with fentanyl. It's cut so much with other substances that many people don't even know what they're consuming, and if you overdose, a dose of naloxone might not be enough to save your life. Plus, ordering this drug or another one containing nitazine without knowing it is almost as easy and convenient as ordering an Uber. While there were other alternatives like heroin or fentanyl, nitazine hasn't been very popular, but now things could be very different. But anyway, we didn't want to end this video on a negative note, so here is a bit of hope. The Uberization of drug use does create a lot of problems, but ironically, it can also have positive aspects. These websites, which are becoming increasingly popular, often encourage users to leave reviews of both the products and the dealers they buy from, so at least they have better quality control than the dealer in the park. It's not exactly a game changer, but hey, it's something. But that's not the most important part. People are also increasingly using websites like these, and even apps designed by governments, to find someone else to use drugs with. Why is this so important? Because 2/3 of all overdose deaths occur in people who are alone. These days, if someone is nearby, they can always administer naloxone and greatly increase the chances of saving your life. In fact, according to one study, naloxone alone hardly saves lives in net terms, largely because, while it makes drug use safer, it also encourages it. Overall, it reduces deaths by 6 to 8%. However, if this medication is combined with having another person present while using drugs, in at least half of the cases, the number of deaths can drop by up to 33%. This is why some governments have created apps to connect people who want to use drugs, so that at least they don't do it alone. And there are also other projects such as supervised safe spaces for drug use, although these initiatives aren't having much success for reasons you can all imagine. So, are we on the brink of a new opioid epidemic in the West? Well, as we always tell you here on Visualeconomik, we don't have a crystal ball. What is clear is that nitazene drugs pose a different challenge than fentanyl, a challenge that economics helps us better understand. In any case, now that we've gotten this far, it's your turn. Did you know this drug existed? What aspect of it do you find most dangerous? Do you think another drug will replace fentanyl, or will it be a long time before we see a similar epidemic again? You can leave your answers down in the comments. And if you want to understand what's really happening in the markets and learn how to manage your money with more confidence, join the Visual Factory Club. It's completely free, and the link is in the description. As always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week, so subscribe to this channel, click the little bell icon so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, hit like, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. See you next time.